The Nintendo 64 may have struggled in its day against Sony's PlayStation, and that's because Freak Boy was cancelled, but Nintendo's last 90s mainline console is celebrated today for bringing us some of their best ever viddy games. And that's why some of the N64's rarest games are so damn expensive, if only for a silly little label. Please note here, any prices you see are likely to change, and we're not including sealed or graded product, because that's baloney. Number 10, Turok Rage Wars Grey version, $500 plus. Turok Rage Wars is a good example of how much someone will pay for a variant if they're truly serious about a complete Nintendo 64 collection and also not paying their mortgage. The game itself is a alright entry in a franchise that's sort of gone the way of Dennis Nedry these days, with a strong emphasis on the multiplayer mayhem that fans enjoyed so much in Turok 2. The whole thing is a bit of a quick cash-in, let's be fair, but there's still a decently enjoyable first player mode, sort of, with various challenges, and then a much deeper experience for as many as 4 players at a time with split screen shooting. A standard copy of Turok Rage Wars is a black cartridge that you've probably seen, and it's pretty cool, that you can buy for a lot less than it sold for in 1998. What's interesting is that the super rare variant in this case is the relatively standard grey that most games came in. If you happen to come across a CIB edition somewhere for less than $1,000, go for it. Disclaimer, we are assuming that you are Wario here. Maybe buy a car or something instead if you aren't. Number 9, F1 Racing Championship, $600 plus. F1 Racing Championship saw a release on the PS1 and PS2, the Dreamcast, PC and the Nintendo 64, and that's why it's on this list obviously. It's the last of those platforms we're paying attention to, of course, as copies of the game were hard to come by even when the title was released in 2000. F1 Racing Championship just didn't make big waves with racing fans on the N64. They were spoiled with some of the most iconic racing games of all time, of course, including, that's right, Iggy's Wrecking Balls. Due to its consistent scarcity, even a loose copy of this game fetches hundreds of dollars on eBay and other third-party websites. If you wanted a CIB version that's also graded, which you shouldn't, you may wind up paying well over $6,000 US. The game itself is fine, with single race and championship racing modes, realistic physics for the time, and some excellent graphics for the time. If you wanted to play a good retro F1 racing sim in which you go around and around and around more than an Xbox exec avoiding a simple question, you could do worse. Just don't think you'll need to sell one of your kidneys to pay for a physical edition of F1 Racing Championship though. A PS1 version, for example, can be found second-hand for less than $30 US. The PS2 version is even cheaper. Hell, you can even find this in the UK for like 50 quid CIB. Maybe the pound isn't so fucked after all. Number 8, GoldenEye, not for resale, $900 plus. We're not being hyperbolic for once when we call GoldenEye one of the best, most influential, most bullshit games of all time. It's weird to think now that a game based on a 2-year-old movie would go on to become one of the most enduringly popular video games of the past quarter century. Imagine if, I don't know, that Uncharted movie got a really good video game adaptation. But here we are, with GoldenEye still being pretty damn popular after all these years. The game was made available on the Switch's N64 Virtual Console and Xbox systems last year, and it's still nice to see the game has a special place in many players' hearts. Unless you're one of those misanthropes who only played multiplayer as Oddjob, in which case you should be forced to pay over $900 for a copy of GoldenEye with a special little sticker. GoldenEye is easy enough to get for your physical N64 collection. If you want everything ever released to the system, however, you may be paying nearly $1,000 for an NFR, which is not for resale, edition. There doesn't seem to be any noticeable differences between this version and the standard version, so keep that in mind if you just want a copy of the game you can hold in your hands. Maybe get a nice little sticker gun and warp reality instead. Number 7, Diddy Kong Racing not for resale, $900+ dinos. It's a shame we've never seen a true full-fat console sequel to Diddy Kong Racing. One of the most unique kart races of all time, where everyone knows at least one person who swears blind that it's better than Mario Kart 64, they swear. Adventure game elements were mixed with a range of different vehicles to create something quite special. And since this is a Donkey Kong title with mildly irritating friend Diddy Kong taking the wheel for this one, you can also expect a game packed with secrets. Sorry if the voiceover quality takes a sudden nosedive, my cat has demanded to come in the room and is going to start shooting a gun or whatever he usually does when he wants to cause chaos. Everything about Diddy Kong Racing has the potential to charm players, even 25+ years on from its 1997 release. A loose cartridge goes for less than $20 or quid in many cases. This is another not for resale kart that's in pretty high demand among collectors. But only 3 have been sold over the last year, showing just how rare it actually is. As far as we can tell, there are no specific differences between the NFR and the normal cartridge. Diddy Kong Racing will bear an NFR sticker, but the cartridge itself is indistinguishable. But just imagine the chance of buying this for $1,000, displaying it proudly on a shelf and a friend coming over and saying, "Oh cool," when they see it. That's absolutely priceless, right? Number 6, Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut, $1,000 to like $7,000?
No pain, no pain. Ice pick. Come on. Ice pick. Oh, I love it.
Clay Fighter's 63rd and a third had and still has its fans, much the same way that some people want Cholera to come back, but most people seem to feel the game was pretty terrible, and that's because it was. The fighting game sort of functions as a parody, but today is mostly just a grab bag of low-hanging, edgy 90s humour, dismal controls, and characters who aren't terribly fun to play with. Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut is essentially more of the same, but with a few extras thrown in for good measure. They put a cherry on top of manure, basically. It's also one of the most consistently rare and sought after N64 games ever made. The main reason for that being that Sculptor's Cut was an exclusive rental at Blockbuster Video. Only 20,000 copies were manufactured, and most of those have been seemingly lost to time. There are precious few copies of this game around, pretty much whatsoever. If you can find a CIB edition of the game, you may have something worth a figure approaching 10 grand. Video stores being what they were when it came to taking care of games back in the day, finding the manual and box for Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut is even rarer than the game itself. But guys, just cherry manure, okay? Cherry manure. Number 5, Turok 2 Seeds of Evil not for resale, $1,700+. Alright, so this is where N64 NFR games do get kind of interesting. There are 2 versions of the NFR copy of Turok 2 Seeds of Evil. The first version is the NTSC edition, which is the North American format that all other NFR games can be found in, with one known exception, which would be the PAL version of the NFR edition of Turok 2 Seeds of Evil. Both versions will contain the first level with a bunch of additional beta content. This is a unique collector's item for sure, featuring content in a form that doesn't exist anywhere else. If you come across either of them, you're looking at some of the rarest N64 games on the planet. A normal full copy of Turok 2 can be purchased quite cheaply, even the N64 original really. The game is also available for PCs. 1700 bones can also get you a pretty good PC in general. Something to think about there, I'll let you sit on that. Number 4, Donkey Kong 64 Grey not for resale, $1,700+. The grey NFR variant of Donkey Kong 64 is even rarer than the yellow one. You're still getting a demo copy of the game that features a special version of level 3 with some beta content that may prove to be a seriously cool little pickup to hardcore Donkey Kong fans or N64 devotees who want to 100% their collection while 0%ing their bank accounts. This game is similarly priced to the not for resale version of Turok 2, but often goes for just a little bit more. In other words, this is another N64 rarity that is extremely difficult to track down. But it might just be worth it to someone who wants everything associated with the Nintendo 64 and this game in particular. You can obviously play the full and original Donkey Kong 64 without too much expense or hassle. However, if you want to recreate the pure experience of walking into a video store, seeing this demo game on display and picking it up to experience DK64 for the very first time, this is one of your only real avenues. Or a DeLorean? Get one of them, might be cheaper. Number 3, Yoshi's Story International Version NFR, $1,700+. Okay, so if you're sick of not for resale games on this list, then fair enough really. Here are several other N64 games that are just generally rare. There's Stunt Racer, Super Rolling, and Worms Armageddon. There you go. They're all a lot more common than these variants though, so that's why they don't quite make the cut. We put a Rayman with a watch on our rarest PS1 games video, so we're sticking to our guns. With some sellers demanding several $1,000s for the international version of the classic title Yoshi's Story, it's worth understanding what you're getting here. Once again, we have an N64 game that you can get fairly cheaply in its standard version. This edition of Yoshi's Story though features the game in Japanese, with a label featuring art that is distinctly different from the one that was sold at retail. These are fascinating details for the completionists, but once again we want to emphasise that you don't need you don't need the international version of Yoshi's Story to experience this bright, challenging platformer for yourself, unless you really care about stickers. Released to rave reviews in 1997, Yoshi's Story brought back at least some of the style of the SNES hit Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. Yoshi's Story is well worth your time if you want to play one of the better N64 games, but is it worth 1,700 bones? We'll let you and your future divorce attorney decide. Number 2, Nintendo 64 test cartridge, $3,300+. No, this is not a spin-off game for everyone's favourite lower mid-card attitude era guy. It's a lot more boring than that, sadly. How rare is the Nintendo 64 test cartridge? Well, we can't even find one available to buy online. One hasn't sold in 2 years. These are simple, fascinating carts that were designed solely to troubleshoot the various functions and overall functionality of any Nintendo 64. There aren't any games to play. They don't even check Minesweeper on there, you know. There are so many interesting menu options, as well as tests for the audio, the controller, and even the quality of your TV screen. It's pretty neat in a dry, boring sort of way, but it's nothing in the way of an actual playing experience. Test cartridges for the Nintendo 64 also features some design differences to the cart itself, namely a JTAG port on top, allowing you to reprogram the cartridge if necessary, and a small light next to the label. This light will come on if there are any issues with your console or controller. Suffering through the water temple? Give me a nice little light instead, any day. While certainly fascinating, understand that the rarity of this thing is such that you could be paying upwards of $10,000. A copy sold for over $3,000 back in 2022, but that was in the COVID bubble, so maybe you'll get lucky and it'll be a lot less. You've got to be pretty lucky to have several grand spare for what would these days be a download though. And number 1, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, grey not for resale, $6,000 to $10,000+. There are 2 different coloured variants of the NFR edition of The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. You might think it's the gold cart, but as it turns out, boring old grey is the version that some N64 fanatics have paid thousands of dollars to have in their collection. But this time, the differences between 2 not for resale versions of the same game are obvious. The grey version comes with a demo of the game that includes various save states and a bunch of beta content. It really is a pretty cool collectible for what is still the darkest and weirdest Link adventure to date. Tears of the Kingdom can't be that dark when I can make this guy in it, right? Prices for a grey not for resale copy of Majora's Mask can vary wildly, but it's highly unlikely that you'll get one for less than $6,000 these days. The gold not for resale can be purchased for a few hundred. This actually sold for just $1,000 back in 2016, which is why it's even more crazy that one current listing on eBay sees the highly sought after Grey Edition with an asking price of more than $15,000. For that kind of money, we may want the actual gilded sword thrown in as a freebie, and then a massive move to crash into the retro gaming market. It's probably for the best. And that was our video looking at some of the rarest N64 games available. How many copies of Sculptor's Cut are you gonna buy now? 1,000? Too right. I've been Jimmy for Cultured Vultures, and thank you for watching.